Welcome to another episode of Fun with Maps. I'm your host, Dan Hanson. Here we see a map from a different perspective. We're used to looking at the flat ones or on our computer. This is a globe, obviously. Depending on your perspective, the Earth is either huge or small and getting smaller. So the map we're looking at today is of a relatively very small country. In fact, it's so small we can't really see it on this globe very well. So you see, here's Africa, Asia, Europe, there's the Mediterranean, there's Cyprus. Right here you can see Turkey and Syria. You'll see the subject of today's episode of Fun with Maps, Lebanon. Very small geographically, but its impact on the world and culture and people is huge. And tragically, it's been a huge part of the news lately. So I'd always planned on doing a Fun with Maps episode on Lebanon because I'm just fascinated with the culture and the people. I know so many Cleveland Lebanese. They're a great community. They have great cultural stuff going on. This shirt I'm wearing is from Lebanon Day held at Cleveland City Hall. You can see the flag of Lebanon with the ubiquitous cedar tree. We'll talk about the cedar trees in a couple of minutes. It's a vibrant community. There's so much to like about the culture. I really like the Dabke dance, for example. Dabke, D-A-B-K-E. We have a really good troupe here in Cleveland called Ajal Dabke Dancers. Ajal is A-J-Y-A-L. So search for my videos about Ajal Dabke Dancers and you'll see what it's like. It's a kind of a circle dance, kind of a line dance. It's got some foot stomping in it. It's a lot of fun. They have it at weddings and celebrations and all. It's a native, what's called Levantine folk dance. And the Levant is an area historic that covered, ancient Syria included today's Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, Israel, and even parts of Turkey. So that's the Levant. So this is a Levantine dance, the Dabke. And it's a circle dance, and it's really something to check out, so I hope you do. But as you know, tragically, and after August 4th, 2020, there's explosions in the city of Beirut, the capital of Lebanon. Hundreds killed, thousands injured, hundreds of thousands instantly homeless. Terrible tragedy. Beirut and Lebanon have had so many tough times for a long time, wars, political issues, and more. This is Fun with Maps, so we're not going to get into the politics or any of that stuff, but just we're going to look at the map and how it affects what's Lebanon provided to the world in respect to culture and heritage and history. Because of their location here, they've really had either influence of or conquered by or infiltrated by all kinds of cultures over the years. The Phoenicians, Canaanite Phoenicians, the Assyrians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Arabs, the Fatimids, the Crusaders, Turks, most recently the French. So Lebanon has absorbed all of this culture and taken it and combined it and made it into their own. So they've got their literature, their dances, their cuisine, their heritage, and all is a combination of all this stuff, the best of it. And it's renowned around the world. So it was a huge tourist spot, as we'll see. And prior to the Civil War, there was a civil war in Lebanon for about 1975 to 1990. So it was a huge tourist destination, very financially stable, and in the 50s and 60s especially, they called it the Switzerland of the Mideast. So it was that stable, and Beirut itself was such a tourist destination here on the Mediterranean. Beirut was such a tourist destination, it was called the Paris of the Middle East. So as one of my Lebanese friends told me, no, they had that backwards. Paris is the Beirut of Europe. So it's tragic to see what's happening in Beirut today. So during the Civil War, about 1 million people emigrated out of Lebanon. There's actually more Lebanese outside the country, anywhere from 4 to 8 million than in Lebanon itself, which is somewhere maybe 4 million. And the majority of the diaspora were Lebanese Christians, but others are Muslims or Druze or Jewish. Interestingly enough, the largest diaspora went to Brazil. There's about 2 to 5 million Lebanese who went to Brazil. There's about another million in Colombia and Argentina. So this is a lot of Lebanese went there. In the U.S. here, anywhere from 500,000 to 900,000 or so Lebanese came here. The major states are, they went to Michigan, California, Ohio, Florida, and Massachusetts. Here in Ohio, there's a large community in Toledo, Ohio, Lebanese. So between 1948 and 1985, about 60,000 Lebanese came into the U.S. and now there's about 5,000 immigrants every year. Previously, most of them had been Christians from Lebanon. Now it's predominantly Muslim, but there's still probably more Christian Lebanese here in the U.S. Than the Muslims. Let's face it, this is a troubled area of the world. We aren't going to talk about the politics. We're not going to talk about the war problems. We're going to look at some of the cultural things that the geography, the map has shown us, has made Lebanon what it is, and some of the great people. And of course, we'll keep the great people of Beirut and all of Lebanon in our thoughts and prayers. Let's get going with this episode of Fun with Maps on Lebanon. Okay, so obviously this is the flag of Lebanon, famous. Here's the cedar tree in the middle. We'll look at them in a second, but let's take a look at the map. This is a CIA map from above. You can see just the size. We talked about how small Lebanon is comparatively. You know, here's Egypt, here's the Mediterranean, here's Cyprus, Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Israel, Saudi Arabia. This little brown patch there, pretty small, that's Lebanon. Okay. In fact, in here you can see this is another CIA map to give you some perspective. Here's Lebanon superimposed, the map of Lebanon superimposed in Maryland. So it's about a third the size of the state of Maryland in the U.S. So it's really geographically it's very small. Let's look at some more detail here. Okay, here's the Middle East here. Okay, Egypt, Sudan. Remember we did the Horn of Africa, good Fun with Maps episode there, and the Nile River coming through here. Big Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iraq, Iran, Georgia, Armenia. Here's Cyprus. Cyprus is the third largest and third most populous island in the Mediterranean. So here's Lebanon here. You can see it's bordered on the north and the east by Syria, and to the south here by Israel. So this we can see a little better. So Cyprus is out here, Israel's down here. This area here is the Golan Heights. That's more of a geopolitical region. That's the area captured from Syria and occupied by Israel during the Six-Day War in 1967. So it's been administered as part of Israel since 1981, but that's here. But this white area here is Lebanon, right on the Mediterranean Sea, this large coast here. And we'll see the Lebanon Mountains, the anti-Lebanon Mountains. Great name, love it. So it's right here, Mediterranean, opening up to the whole Arab world. So that's where they've got all their rich history and their cultural identity and diversity. So the word Lebanon actually derives from a Semitic root, LBN, which means white. And let's see if we can see here. That refers to the snow caps of Mount Lebanon. This is Mount Lebanon Range here, and you can see in the CIA satellite picture the white snow caps of the two mountain ranges in Lebanon. So that's where the name came from, Lebanon, meaning white. Snow is not unusual in Lebanon. You know, they've got ski resorts there. Because of how Lebanon is geographically, it's so small, you can be skiing in the morning and then over on the beach in the Mediterranean in the afternoon. You know, it's very small, tight country there. So here's Beirut, the capital, right on the coast. The word Beirut derives from a Phoenician word, bero, meaning the wells or fountain, and that refers to Beirut's water table, accessible water table. So that's Beirut there. And as you'd expect, most of the major cities of Lebanon are located along the coast. You know, they're ports and trading points for all that. So the top 4 cities by population are all, you know, on the coast here. So we have Beirut, which is capital, the largest, almost 2 million people. Very important city for commercial trading, banking, tourism, all kinds of stuff, and of course the center of the devastation. If we look at a NASA picture here, okay, a little zoom in here. So here's Beirut. It's actually a peninsula, as you can see. Here's the Mediterranean, here's an arena, golf course, the airport, and this is where the tragedy right in the port happened earlier this month. You can see it's here's a peninsula, but as you get out here, you get the foothills of the mountain range. So Beirut's kind of limited there and where it can grow because the mountains start up here. So like we say, Beirut, known as the Paris of the Mideast, all the tourism, people go to the National Museum of Beirut, the Sursak Museum, the Archaeological Museum of the American University of Beirut. They've hosted sporting events like the Pan Arab Games and all that. So it's Beirut, right in the middle, right on the coast, in this peninsula here. Second biggest city is Tripoli, up here in the north. They've only got about 230,000 people. It's also an ancient city like Beirut, with great old architecture and heritage. Tourists go to see the clock tower, the Palm Islands nature reserves. It's got a lot of religious history of mosques and churches and all that. So here's Tripoli, second biggest city. Third is Sidon, about 163,000 people. So again, right on the Mediterranean here. Beirut, Tripoli, Sidon. Excuse my mispronunciations. This has been around from prehistoric times, and you know, it's based on agricultural activities. They have a lot of wheat farming there. And then there's Tyre down here, the fourth biggest. It's also right on the Mediterranean, as you can see. It was back in Phoenician times, Tyre was there. It's got about 135,000 people, founded millennia ago. You know, it's a huge trading center. It's really an island. You can see it's a little off the mainland here, and this is where the purple dye was produced. That, you know, royalty always wore purple. This is where it came from, Tyre here. It's so historically important. It's been designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site because of its significant role in history and antique architecture. Okay, now we can see here, and I'll get to a better map in a second. This is a river coming down here and then heading right to the Mediterranean. That's the Litani River. Let's see if we can find that. Okay. This photo, or this drawing, was made by someone named SA 3.0, and it's a Creative Commons license, so thank you, SA 3.0. So here's the Litani. It starts in this fertile, it's called the Baalbek, or the Bekaa Valley, just west of this Baalbek, and it empties just north of Tyre down here. It's about 140 kilometers in length. It's all within Lebanon. You know, it starts up here, goes into the Mediterranean there, so it's really important for water supply and irrigation and all that. It was named after a Canaanite deity who was a seven-headed sea serpent, actually. So I guess they thought it wound like a serpent through the Bekaa Valley, and so it's it's parallel to the Syrian border here. Down here it comes within about 5 kilometers of the Hasbani River, and that's the major tributary of the Jordan River. So this part where it turns is an area called the Kwazimaya. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. And they have citrus crops and bananas there. So it's parallel here it's parallel to the border of Syria. Here it's parallel to the border with Israel. That's the Litani River. So as we see with the Litani River, this valley here, the Bekaa Valley, it's a fertile valley. It's the most important farming region in Lebanon. Here they got Mount Lebanon to the west, and the anti-Lebanon mountains to the east, which is an amazing name. I'll talk to you about that in a second. So Zali is the capital here. See Zali, that's the capital of the Bekaa Valley. It's in the largest city there. It lies just north of the main Beirut-Damascus highway, which basically bisects the valley. So there's Zali in Baalbek, and let's look at. Here's a picture. It's a public domain picture of Zali, the capital of the Bekaa Valley. Let's see how you can see that pretty good. Okay. So of course you can't talk about Lebanon without talking about the cedar tree. Here's their flag. It's important enough to be the symbol here on their flag. And when we look at the high slopes of Mount Lebanon, that's the last remaining old growth groves of the famous cedars of Lebanon are on those high slopes. There's a Cedars of God World Heritage Site. This is a picture of a cedar there from that site. This is by, let's see, a guy named Dims Ficus at Greek Wikipedia. Dimsfikas. Thank you for this great picture. The Cedar of God site, mature Lebanon cedar in the Cedars of God Nature Preserve on Mount Lebanon. So that's a great picture there. And it's been, over the century, cedar was exploited by the Phoenicians, Egyptians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Romans, Israelites, Turks. It all started, the Phoenicians would use the cedar wood for their merchant fleets, and they needed timber for their ships, and the cedar wood, that led to them, the Phoenicians, becoming the first sea trading nation in the world. So the Phoenicians were smart, and some of their successors, they kept replanting and restocking the range even as late as the 16th century. And other countries used the cedar tree. The Egyptians used cedar resin for their mummification process. They used the cedar wood for some of the first hieroglyphs on papyrus. We know in the Bible Solomon procured cedar timber to build a temple in Jerusalem. So the cedar tree, it's really just part of Lebanon. Here's a picture in the Baruch forest. Okay, cedar trees there. It's interesting. This is in 1553, a man named Pierre Bellon wrote a book called Observations, and in 1553 he sketched this picture of cedar tree which he found in Lebanon. So they've been around a long time, and they've been a symbol of Lebanon for a long time. You know that here's a fun with maps fact. the Lebanon cedar, the cedar of Lebanon, is mentioned 103 times in the Bible. So, for example, in Ezekiel 31:3, it says, "Behold, I will liken you to a cedar in Lebanon with fair branches and forest shade." So, when you think of Lebanon, think of the cedar tree. When you think of the cedar tree, think of Lebanon. It's just that entrenched in their heritage and, like you say, even in their flag. You know, as I said, there's no way you can cover the history of ancient culture and land like Lebanon, you know, in the scope of a Fun with Maps episode. I just wanted to talk about a few things here, though. The earliest evidence of civilization in Lebanon dates back more than 7,000 years. You know, that predates recorded history. So the Phoenicians lived there, and they took those great cedar trees and built ships, and they, you know, 3200 BC or so, they had this nice trade here. This is a great map by DOOFI Talk. Creative Commons license from Wikipedia, and you can see here's Lebanon here. There's Tyre we just saw in Sidon in Lebanon. Here's Cyprus, Crete. You know, we didn't have Egypt here yet, really. Iberia, you know, Spain and Portugal, Carthage, some of these ancient, Cyrene, some of these ancient names. But this is what would happen with these coastal cities in Lebanon. The Phoenicians would get there from up here. They'd get their cedar wood, build these ships, and they'd have this great network all along here, all along the Mediterranean. In around 64 BC, the region came under the rule of the Roman Empire and eventually became one of its leading centers of Christianity. So this region that is now Lebanon, is with the rest of Syria and much of Anatolia, became a leading center of Christianity. So you should know about this guy named Meron. During the late 4th and early 5th century, there was a hermit named Meron, Maron, and he established a monastic tradition and near the range, you know, Mount Lebanon. And they had monks there, and the Christians who followed him there came to be known as Maronites. They moved into the mountains to avoid religious persecution. So here's a picture of some Lebanese Christian men from Mount Lebanon range in the 1800s. You can see them there. So, you know, there's this long history. The 7th century, the Muslim Arabs conquered Syria, and they established a new regime. And after that happened, the Byzantines put out a call to the Pope in Rome for assistance in the 11th century. Then you had the Crusades. One of the lasting effects of the Crusades was the relationship with the French and the Maronites. So a lot of the Christian communities in the East swore allegiance to the Pope in Constantinople. The Maronites proclaimed allegiance to the Pope in Rome. So the French then saw them as Roman Catholic brethren. And that's how France and Italy, even after the fall of the Crusader states, led to centuries of support for the Maronites. So it goes on and on. Lebanon was conquered by the Ottomans in the 16th century, under their rule for 400 years or so, and that collapsed after World War I. And then what happened was 5 provinces were designated. And this is pretty fascinating. This is the French mandate. So they expanded, you've got these 5 areas here. The state of Aleppo, state of Damascus, there's a Druze state, Greater Lebanon, which is what we consider Lebanon now, and up here, the Alawite state. So this was the mandate for Syria and Lebanon in 1922, the French mandate. And these state borders were established until 1945. So in 1943, Lebanon gained their independence. They were a founding member of the UN in 1945. They were a member of the Arab League since 1945. they were doing really good political and economic stability, but the bloody civil war from 75 to 90 really wreaked havoc on the country, and it led to actually military occupation by Syria for a while and Israel for a while too. So, like I say, beyond the scope of this episode, but it's a fascinating history that I hope you check out sometime. So let's end this episode of Fun with Maps with some Fun with Maps facts. Let's look at some famous people with Lebanese roots. And how about the actor Vince Vaughn? Casey Kasem, and that depends on your age. If you're old enough, you think of him as the disc jockey. If you're younger, it's the voice of Shaggy and Scooby-Doo. Ralph Nader, Shakira, Salma Hayek, Amal Alamuddin, which is, you probably know better as George Clooney's wife, Paul Anka, Omar Sharif, Tony Shalhoub, who played Monk, Keanu Reeves, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, he was born in Beirut, Marlo Thomas, Jamie Farr from MASH, Jane Wiedlin of the Go-Go's, Neil Sedaka, and even Tiny Tim. Of course, the most famous might be Khalil Gibran, Lebanese-American writer, poet, and artist, best known as the author of The Prophet, which was first published in the U.S. in 1923. It's one of the best-selling books of all time, having been translated into more than 100 languages. So he was born in a village of the Ottoman-ruled Mount Lebanon to a Maronite family. And he and his mother and siblings came to the U.S., Boston, in 1895. At the age of 15, he went back to Lebanon for college, and then he came back to Boston in 1902 when his sister died. So everyone knows Khalil Gibran and The Prophet. Another person you may not know is Lebanese, but you should, is Danny Thomas. Actor, yes, but what he did as founder of St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital is incredible. His parents were Maronite Christian immigrants from Lebanon. He was raised in Toledo. He went to the University of Toledo. He used he had an anglicized birth name, Amos Jacobs Carouse. He used to perform on radio with that name. But when he went to clubs where his salaries were better, he didn't want his parents and his family to know that he was working in clubs. So he took the names of two of his brothers, Danny and Thomas, and became Danny Thomas. So there he was, living in Ward 6 in Toledo in Lucas County, Ohio. And he was listed as, in the 1920 census, they were born in Syria, S-E-R-I-A, and that their mother tongue is Syrian, S-E-R-I-A-N. So, yes, of course, Lebanon was part of the Syria, the Ottoman Empire, until 1920, and Lebanese immigrants were then identified as Syrians in most of the world and as Turks in Latin America. So, until like 1920, if you were Lebanese, you were thought to be a Syrian in North America and Turkish in Latin America. So the story is he was a starving actor, and he made a vow that if he got successful, he would open a shrine dedicated to St. Jude Thaddeus, the patron saint of hopeless causes. So he became successful in the 50s, and they began traveling around and raising funds for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. They treat children from all over the world with childhood cancer and look for cures. It's just a fantastic thing. This is fascinating to me. I don't know, with all the diversity in Lebanon, I don't know how they do this, but they have a national pact of 1943. Listen to this. It requires that the president of Lebanon must be Maronite Christian, the speaker of the parliament has to be a Shiite Muslim, the prime minister a Sunni Muslim, and the deputy speaker of parliament and deputy prime minister be Greek Orthodox. Amazing. Their national legislature is the unicameral parliament of Lebanon. It's got 128 seats, and they're divided equally between Christian and Muslims, proportionally between the 18 different denominations and proportionally between its 26 regions. It just blows my mind. Can you imagine the United States saying that, okay, the president has to be one religion and the Speaker of the House has to be a different one, and all that? It's
it's fascinating. Because of they have this sensitive political balance with the various religious groups. They haven't taken an official census since 1932, and they celebrate both national and both Christian and Muslim holidays. So that's just a fascinating fact to me. So one final Fun with Map fact, Beirut, the Paris of the Mideast, tourism accounted for about 10% of its GDP. And in 2009, long before the most recent tragedies, the New York Times ranked Beirut the #1 travel destination in the world due to its nightlife and hospitality.
I hope you enjoyed this Fun with Maps episode about Lebanon. It's an amazing country, an amazing place. My good friend Pierre Bijani, he's a leader of the Lebanese community here in Cleveland, Ohio. He said that Beirut has been destroyed about 12 times over its history, and this is just another terrible tragedy, and that it will return. So we're hoping and praying that for the people in the city of Beirut, as they come back, and they will come back. If you're so inclined, Pierre suggests donating to the Lebanese Red Cross. They're directly helping people there. So also, if you're so inclined, please click on the subscribe button here on your page so that you can be kept up to date for the next episode and future episodes of Fun with Maps. And if you like it, send us a click on like. We appreciate that. If you have ideas for future episodes, please comment. We like your comments and we enjoy that. So I'm your host, Dan Hanson. Thanks for learning about Lebanon with me, and we'll see you next time on Fun with Maps.